Chapter 1. The invitation I almost declined. I still remember the day the invitation arrived. It was wrapped in gold foil, sealed with a delicate wax stamp, the kind that smelled faintly of rose oil when you opened it. The calligraphy was flawless, every curve and stroke showing the kind of care that only expensive hands could give. It was my cousin Samira's wedding. Her father, my Chasha, owned two textile factories and a mansion big enough to host a cricket match in the backyard. Weddings in our family were not events. They were productions, each one trying to outdo the last. When I first held the envelope, my instinct was to put it aside, maybe even throw it in the drawer with the unpaid bills and expired coupons. I wasn't avoiding Samira. She had always been kind to me in that polite, distant way that rich relatives are kind to their less fortunate cousins. But I knew what attending meant, walking into a hall filled with people who measured your worth by the car you drove, the dress you wore, and the title on your business card. And me, I was a security guard, not at a bank or an airport, but at a private mall in Clifton. It paid the bills barely. I worked 6 days a week, 12-hour shifts, in the uniform, stiff navy blue pants, white shirt and cap, had worn grooves into my skin from years of wearing it in the Karachi heat. When I told my mother about the invitation, she placed her hand on mine. "Go, Beta," she said softly. "Show them you're doing fine." I wanted to tell her that fine meant boiling water at midnight because we couldn't afford a geyser repair, or walking to work when the bus didn't come because I couldn't spare the rickshaw fare. But her eyes were hopeful, and I couldn't crush that, so I said yes. The day of the wedding, I stood in front of my small mirror, holding a simple black dress I'd bought from a clearance rack. It wasn't fancy, but it fit well and covered the uniform tan lines on my arms. I curled my hair as best I could with my old iron, dabbed on lipstick, and told myself over and over, "You belong there, you belong there." The venue was the Pearl Regency Banquet Hall, the kind of place you only see lit up in bridal magazines. The gates shimmered with fairy lights, and men in crisp uniforms, the hired valet staff, rushed to open car doors for the arriving guests. I stepped out of my rickshaw and felt the eyes on me instantly. Not cruel, not yet, just curious. I wasn't arriving in a chauffeur-driven Prado like the others. My heels clicked on the marble steps as I made my way inside, clutching my small handbag like a shield. The scent of jasmine garlands and expensive perfume filled the air. Crystal chandeliers hung above, scattering light across tables draped in silk. Waiters in white gloves moved like choreographed dancers, balancing trays of mocktails and hors d'oeuvres. For a moment, I almost forgot the heaviness in my chest. Almost. Because then, across the hall, I saw him, my father. Tall, still broad-shouldered, dressed in a sherwani that probably cost more than my monthly salary. His hair was streaked with gray now, but his eyes were still the same sharp brown that could pierce through me. And he was walking straight toward me. If you're ready, I can continue with chapter 2, my father's words cut deeper than knives, where the humiliation scene happens and sets the stage for the entire story arc. Do you want me to continue chapter by chapter until the full 10,000 words are done? You said yes, ChatGPT said. Perfect. We'll keep going chapter by chapter until we build the full 10,000 word first-person story. Here's your continuation. Chapter 2. My father's words cut deeper than knives. He reached me in seconds. His steps confident, his expression unreadable. "You came," he said flatly, as if I'd been summoned rather than invited. "Assalamu alaikum, Abu," I replied, forcing a polite smile. His eyes flicked over my dress, my handbag, my heels. Not in admiration, an assessment, the way a jeweler might inspect a piece of glass pretending to be a diamond. Before I could ask how he was, a group of 3 well-dressed guests approached us. 2 men in tailored suits, 1 woman in a heavy, emerald set that glittered under the lights. They greeted him warmly. "Mashallah, you haven't changed a bit. And your daughter, yes?" I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd introduce me with pride. But he'd say I was his eldest, that I worked hard, that I was independent. Instead, he smiled, that same charming smile I'd seen him use on business clients, and said, "Yes, this is my daughter. She's just a security guard." The words hit me like a slap. Just a single word, so small but so sharp, slicing through whatever dignity I'd managed to patch together before walking into this room. The woman's smile faltered. The men exchanged glances. Then came the polite, thin-lipped chuckles, not loud enough to draw attention, but enough for me to hear. I felt my face heat up, my heart pounding in my ears. I wanted to vanish into the ground, to melt into the marble floor. Instead, I stood frozen, my smile stiff and trembling. "Yes," I said quietly, "I am." But my voice was drowned out by their small talk, which had already shifted to the catering, the decor, the bride's lehenga. I was invisible again, except for the burning in my chest. I drifted away from them, toward the back of the hall where the crowd thinned out. My fingers itched to call my mother, to tell her I'd made a mistake coming here. But I couldn't. Not yet. The rest of the evening blurred into a haze of clinking glasses, distant laughter, and my father's occasional glance in my direction, never warm, never apologetic, just watchful. But deep down something was shifting in me. A quiet, simmering resolve. He had just turned me into the butt of his joke. He had reduced my years of work, my endless shifts, my survival, into a throwaway line. And I didn't know it then, but the night wasn't over. Fate was about to hand me a stage much bigger than the wedding, and my father was going to see me in a way he'd never seen me before. If you like, I can move straight into Chapter 3, The Weight of Uniforms and Judgment, where we go deep into her backstory, why she became a security guard, and set up the suspense for the wedding. Incident. Do you want me to keep building it right now without stopping until all 10 chapters are done? You said Kalan, yes, ChatGPT said. All right, we'll keep the momentum going and push through the entire 10 chapters in first person. So you get the full 10,000 word cinematic version in one flow. Here's the continuation. Chapter 3, The Weight of Uniforms and Judgment. Some people wear uniforms with pride. Doctors, pilots, army officers. When they walk into a room, people straighten up, they nod in. Respect, they ask questions about their work. For me, my uniform was an invitation for judgment. The stiff navy pants, the white shirt that never seemed white enough no matter how many times I washed it, the cap that made my hair stick to my scalp in the Karachi heat. It was a shield, yes, but one that came with a price. When I wore it, I became invisible. People didn't look at my face. They looked at the badge, and that was all they needed to know. I became Madam Security to the shop owners at the mall. I became Bada Zara at Art Deco to the old aunties who lost their shopping bags. I became Oisai Peho to impatient delivery boys, and yet every shift mattered. I learned to read people, their body language, the tiny cues that gave away their intentions. I knew when someone was about to steal, when a fight was about to break out, when a customer was about to faint from the heat. My job wasn't glamorous, but it was important. My father never saw it that way. To him, if it didn't come with a fat paycheck and an air-conditioned office, it wasn't worth anything. And tonight, in front of his friends, he'd said it out loud. I wandered to the far side of the hall, sipping my mocktail like it was a shield against the eyes I imagined on me. The band played soft music, the bride and groom posed for endless photos, and the clinking of cutlery echoed in the background. That's when I saw him, Faisal. Chapter 4. A familiar face in the crowd. Faisal was leaning against one of the grand pillars near the entrance, scanning the crowd with the calm, watchful gaze of someone used to spotting trouble. He was in full event security gear, black suit, earpiece, and polished shoes. When his eyes landed on me, his face lit up. "Oi, Madam Security," he called softly, grinning. I couldn't help but laugh. Faisal and I had worked together for 2 years before he'd moved to private event security. He used to tease me for taking my job too seriously until the day I caught a pickpocket he'd missed. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Working," he said with a shrug. "You? Not working, just surviving?" We stood together for a few minutes, catching up on the old days. But even as we talked, my eyes kept scanning the crowd. Old habits die hard. That's when I saw him. Chapter 5. The spark before the storm. Near the back entrance, a man stood half hidden behind a decorative pillar. He didn't fit in. Not in the way he was dressed, not in the way he kept glancing toward the stage where Samira and her groom were seated. His hand was buried deep in his jacket pocket, and his jaw was tight, his eyes sharp. "Faisal," I murmured, nodding in the man's direction. "You know him?" Faisal followed my gaze and frowned. "No, not one of ours." We watched him for a moment. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, his gaze darting from the couple to the exits. My instincts screamed. And then a loud crash from the kitchen area. Plates shattered, guests gasped, and in that split second of distraction, the man moved. Chapter 6. When the wedding stopped, he shoved past a waiter, sending a tray of drinks crashing to the floor. "I didn't think I are,"